The S-13 was made to be able to observe aerial footage of training and battle after it had already commenced at a later time in order to confirm potential hits, to keep pilots accountable, and so that pilots could look over what they possibly did wrong or could improve on to hone in on their skills in aerial weaponry use through the application of missiles, guided missiles, cannons, or bombs. As soon as an aircraft's main armament trigger is pressed, for the S-13, the camera begins to photograph for exactly 3 seconds and then stops if the trigger switch is disconnected from the circuit within those 3 seconds. Or, if the trigger is continuously held, it will go over that 3-second mark and continue until it can revert. The S-13 would see a long, healthy role in the Soviet Union and its allies in gathering combat footage and for the use in training applications from many aircraft spanning from 1949 all the way into today, with potential limited use from many countries. There were 3 distinct S-13 version designations. S-13-100OS, which is the most common version and the one I will be covering today. The S-13-300-100OS, and this was the designation for the enhanced lens version with the FS2 lens. Then lastly, there was the S-13-400-100OS, which has a similar lens to the FS2, but slightly more enhanced with greater magnification, and this lens was known as the F3 lens. The later S-13 cameras that were manufactured had their name changed to S-13A. Now, the same still applies to other cameras that were labeled as S-13-300-100OS. They would be also called S-13A 300-100OS. The S-13 camera would be made in the Soviet Union under the Comms Company, but was also manufactured in the Polish People's Republic and Czechoslovak Socialist Republic. I have not been able to find any evidence of any other country making the S-13, but both Poland and Czechoslovakia were granted the ability to manufacture copies of the MiG-15 by the Soviet Union, which would have given them access to manufacture their own S-13s. They both also had their own fairly large aviation industries before this decision was ever made, and continued to make their own aircraft trainers well beyond their production MiG-15s, such as the TS-11 for Poland or the L-29 for Czechoslovakia. The other outlier is China, as they produced their own MiG-15 copies, but I have not been able to find any information that describes what they'd be called or how they were produced. Luckily, it's very easy to tell which of the 3 main countries made an S-13. The Soviet Union usually had either a black or green grip producing texture for the outside coating, and on the name plaque will usually have the Comms logo, which stands for the Kazan Optical Mechanical Plant, still based in the Kazan region within Russia to this day. The S-13s with the Comms logo will always be in black or dark gray. Sometimes they can be found with just the BZN text with no Comms logo, and these will be in the green texture coating usually. And of course, all text on the outside of the device and on the lenses themselves will be in Russian. The Polish S-13s are generally all black paint, alongside having the Polish People's Republic coat of arms eagle next to the name plaque, alongside all the text being in Polish. And then lastly, for the Czechoslovakian version, it is the least different and the most similar compared to the Soviet BZN S-13 version, with the same grain gripping texture finish, with all the text. The only difference is all the text is in Czech, and on the side of the device, instead of requiring 27 volts, it requires 26. And the Czech version even has the literal translation for BZN on the top as well. I'm currently not sure if this is a coincidence or purposeful, but it seems very purposeful. Now, later production S-13s developed by Comms were displayed as S-13A 100OS on the name plaque, or just S-13A on the name plaque. And the reason for this change is because the light housing, which holds 2 lamps, was removed. This piece right here was present because it would allow for the installation of a watch to track time of the shots and the duration of the flight easier. This was later deemed unnecessary and removed completely through these newer versions. These newer S-13A versions as well also had a different latching system to hold on to the lid to get access to the cassette. The newer ones just had a push down button, I believe, whereas the old ones, you position this lever upwards, and then there we go. It will allow you to open it up. The S-13 camera is designed to take 27 volts of DC power. For Czechoslovakian examples like this one, the device only requires 26 volts. Once given power, there is an electric motor that will begin to operate. This motor will turn the main gear with the cutout in it, which is how the film gets exposed through the lens. This main gear has a shaft on it that will then turn a cam drivetrain, and after this cam reaches one full revolution, will turn the clutch enough to place the next frame from the film into position to be used through the lens again. There is a small bar on the cassette itself that is connected to the pulling roller directly that will ensure this action occurs. The pulling roller and receiving spool are both interconnected with a belt that allows them to turn simultaneously to pull the film from the main spool over to it, where it'll then be stored after used. On the front of the device, there is a lid that is locked in place by an outer circle tab, so this screw, which is given spring pressure from this little locking tab with a 45-degree cut into this piece right here. This spring tension prevents it the spring tension provides this block from going up, meaning it cannot be turned currently. And then this cap can be taken off, and within this housing resides two lamps. This cap, once taken off, can be replaced with another cap that holds a small watch to record the entire length of the flight for the entirety of it. And for key moments, like shooting and bombing and so on and so forth, these lamps right here, will help amplify the watch onto the film to denote when it took place and help compare to the previous one. The S-13 can also be installed vertically to allow for accommodation to different space requirements through an additional adapter called a shooting prism, which has a built-in mirror that just changes the recorded image from upwards through the lens to forwards. So you would untighten this screw right here, and you would just slot it on here, which I'm not going to do, but you would just slot it on here, and then you would retighten the screw, and then you can have it basically facing upwards to fulfill this accommodation. Now, I have not seen any aircraft use this before, so I'm not sure what would have used it, but if I can find something, I'll supplement it. And then, just like most film cameras, the S-13 does come with colored lenses for different light and weather conditions. So, and this goes for both glass pieces. So, the shooting prism has its own colored pieces of glass, and so does the main lenses of the S-13 as well. And these are green, yellow, and I believe there are red versions, but I do not have them. The technical parameters for the S-13 are as follow. The focal length lens field of view in millimeters is 100 and 300. The field of view for degrees per minute is 13 degrees by 30 by 16 degrees by 30 and 4 degrees by 30 and by 5 degrees by 30. The width of the film in millimeters is 35. The shape and frame size is an oval, or 24 by 30. The average shooting speed, also known as the frames per second, is 8 plus or minus 2 frames. The film stock for meters and frames is 8 meter long film and 240 frames in total. However, with that said though, these cameras were never typically given the full amount that it could take. They were only ever issued 5.2 meter long strips of film containing 150 frames. Time of continuous photographing, seconds, is 30. However, with the aforementioned film given, it is usually around 19.6 seconds for time of continuous photographing. The exposure per second is 1 to 100, and the lens aperture is 6.3 divided by 12.5 and 4.5 divided by 16. And the time of operation of the temporary mechanism after lowering the combat button for every second is 3. To take the cassette out, all you need to do is turn the handle in the latch that holds the lid on the top to the opening position. So this cutout right here, you just have to move this locking lever to that position, and then it'll automatically spring open. Now, as you can see here, there is a piece of spring sheet rather, right here, which provides tension onto the cassette, forcing it downwards to be better placed in position. And then in order to take up the cassette after that is very simple. You just pull up on it and it'll come out on its own. However, there is quite I wouldn't say quite a bit of tension. It's not an extensive amount, but because of this spring right here in the back of the device, this provides tension, pushing it forward to have a better seal and fitment. On the top of the cassette is some important information. Firstly, the name of the S-13 is present, so you know what the cassette is, and the serial number for the cassette. Now, in the very middle of it is a plaque. This will be on all versions. Of course, they do subtly change, but mainly, within this plaque will display important information to what may be on the film contained within the cassette. The text on the left here roughly means surname and practice/task. Surname refers to either the individual aircraft, number, squad, or regiment, and this would be written within the quotation marks right there. It was, however, nothing was ever written here. And then the practice/task refers to what the intended effect of the film was, which is the large space present here, which is written with one. Let's see if I can get this good. One esque. And then at the bottom here, there is a 19, which is the supplement for the year, and then you write in the year that whatever the exercise took place, and if so, when the day specifically of when it was recorded. Now on this cassette, this is a little bit more special because it says one ESC on it, and the other cassette that I have right here does say the same thing, but this one says 1958. So eventually, in 1958, this was used. Now, the S-13 is designed to take a standard Soviet aerial photography film that has a set ISO of 1000 on it, and it being a 35mm film. This film would usually be around 5.2 meters long, but could be maxed out at using 8 meters, supposedly. On the outside body of the lens, by the way, this is the other lens that the S-13 is given, there is a 3-position switch, which is this knob right here, that will allow restriction given to the aperture within the lenses of the S-13 for different weather conditions. On all versions of the S-13, there are 3 main positions labeled as cloudy, cloud, and clear. So usually in that order. The light's a bit bright, but cloudy is usually at the very top. Cloudy is usually at the top, then cloud, clear. Yeah, okay. But anyway, but mainly the first position, cloudy, is meant for more serious weather that may present, typically rain and therefore be extremely cloudy. This mode will make the aperture fully open. The second mode, known as cloud, is for more typical days with light to medium cloud cover in the general region. In this mode, the aperture restriction is about, give or take, half. And then the last mode is for completely clear weather. There's little to no clouds, and this mode provides the most restriction given to the aperture. The S-13 was issued primarily for the normal S-13 100 OS versions with two lenses, the I-10 and the Fed 100 lenses. The I-10 lens gives the aperture values in the cloudy setting 1 to 3.5. In the cloud setting, the aperture output is 1 to 5.6. And finally, in the clear setting, the aperture output is 1 to 11.0. The full name for I-10 stands for Industar 10, which was one of the lens naming conventions made in the Soviet Union by COMS, KMZ, LZOS, and Fed for primarily certain 4-element 3-group lenses. However, the modes mentioned before give different aperture values in the Fed 100, of course, which are, in cloudy, the aperture output is 1 to 6.3. In cloud, the aperture output is 1 to 9, and in clear, the aperture output is 1 to 12.5. And just like the I-10 special name meaning, the Fed 100 would be specially manufactured by Fed or the Kharkov engineering plant for the S-13, which is a company still around today based in Ukraine within the Kharkov region. Fed originated as a children's commune for the displacement of children during World War I, the Soviet Revolution, and then the later Civil War. Later through the 50s through 70s, Fed would get many factories and be relegated to making items such as civilian cameras and the manufacturing of military aircraft components. Aircraft like Su-7, MiG-23, MiG-25, and many, many more. Nowadays, Fed continues the production of aircraft parts and service and overhauling of aircraft since 2005. For the S-13 300 100 OS, the lens that it is given is called the FS2. The FS2's aperture outputs are 1 to 5.6, 1 to 8, 1 to 11, and 1 to 16. I do not, however, have specific aperture outputs for the f3 lens for the S-13 400 100 OS, but the basic technical maximum is 4.5 to 400. On the front of the lens for both the I-10 and the Fed 100, there's a small glass ring which can be taken out and be supplemented with one of the colored ones for varying weather conditions, and it's very simple. There are two little key slots right here, and then a piece of glass just comes straight on out, and you just supplement it with one of the other ones, and then you just put it back in there. You can just screw it back on. It's not too hard to do, thankfully. You just want to keep going till you can't anymore. Oh, did I get it? Yep. In order to decrypt the film to gain understanding of vital information from the S-13 on the flight, there are two special machines that are used in order to gain this information. The main one is known as the EDI 452. This machine is specifically designed to interpret this film by allowing it to be enhanced, stretched, and will have presets to compare it, and generally has mechanical abilities built into the device that will allow the film decryption job to be carried out more easily. Now, the other machine that could have been used was more or less just a basic projector that could accept the film to be projected at a more larger scale, and those are most often used when the pilots are viewing the film they took. Within the EDI 452 machine are presets to have a guided reference and specific options that allow for the determination of range, height, length, and shooting, and size of objects within the film much more easily than doing it by hand. However, at this moment, I haven't been able to find a manual for this machine on the internet, so I won't be able to go into too much detail here about how to decrypt the film. But through another source I personally have, called this book right here, the Methodical Manual on the Use of Means of Objective Control of Flight Parameters in Combat Use in Frontline Aviation Units, made in, I believe it was 1972. 1 second. 1971. And this is an actual book that was published by the Soviet Air Force military and such. I can go into some details and some principles. If I can find a manual for the EDI 452 later down, I may make a more concise follow-up to this topic. But the general rule of thumb is, for decrypting film of any sort produced by any combat photo camera, is that calculations to determine exact pinpoints for usage of weapons from cannons, missiles, bombs, and the sort at the location of where they hit is irrelevant for the required desired task and purpose from the cameras. It is deemed too cumbersome for everyday use with combat units. However, when that information is desired, there are numerous calculations one can make to find this information out from the aircraft's speed, height, dive angle, and roll. The main primary use of these cameras, in use by the pilots mainly, is for the analysis of errors performed by the pilot to see what can be done better next time and to be given an objective assessment on how they did while doing the task. Actions like determining accuracy and objectives destroyed seem to usually be regulated to units that are more consistent with aerial reconnaissance. The S-13 and the AKS-5 are great at getting wider angles of the targets the pilot is trying to aim at. However, the main downside of the S-13 and the AKS-5 compared to the SSH-45 and FKP-2-1, which I will go into more later, trust me, is that more pictures will be needed to understand aiming errors on targets, which also can only be found indirectly, as there is no aid from an ASP gun sight from the main aircraft. For the S-13, it is recommended that if aerial gunnery is anticipated, that the camera be installed with no angle of deviation and is facing straight from the installation frame with no deviation, as I said. However, if the use of bombs is anticipated, it is recommended that the camera can be tilted downwards by 5 degrees or more if desired. No set limit was ever mentioned in the book that I showed. And this is done so that the camera can get the target in picture before the pilot begins the attack with the use of bombs. It will also allow the camera to get a few more seconds on the target after dropping the bomb or bombs, compared to it having no angle change at all. At a later time, I will try to get more info and make a more follow-up on this topic, as I don't want to bloat this too much, and this really is heavy in the whole EDI 452 machine department, but there are a bunch of numerous things to learn about this as well. The Czech version of the S-13 is housed within a very standard military green painted wooden box with the device name, serial number, and that's pretty much it. There is a key lock on the front. I never got a key, so who knows, but a key lock, and then within the latch right here itself, there is a little hollowed out space where you can put a piece of wire to clamp down, requiring it to be snipped off for protective reasons. Anyway, but with that being said, Soviet examples, or rather Soviet comms examples, will always be in metal containers. Okay, 1 second then. I need to do a bit of a switcheroo now. Soviet examples, specifically from comms, will always be in these metal cases. And these metal cases were very standardized. So these cases were used for the FKP-2, SSH-45, as you can see here, in the PAL-473, and the various S-13s, S-13A, S-13, you name it. The only ones that were different were for the S-13 300, 100s, and OS, the 400 version, of course, because the lens is too long. But I digressed. But they're all the same carriers. They can be different colors. This one, as you can see, is all white, but they can be primarily black. And it's usually black, but, you know, it can be a bit of a gray, black, white. Those are the main colors. And then I can't find any pictures of Polish S-13 wooden cases, but more than likely they're going to be wooden cases, and they should be similar to the Czech green color, or they're going to be a darker color of wooden box. Now for the main insides of the kit. So to open it, just push the latch up, move it out of the way, and then the gloriness is there for you. So start off with the main inside of the kit. The S-13 itself, try not to knock anything too much over, is housed in this canvas bag. I believe it's canvas. For some reason, I'm honestly, no other Soviet camera that I know of personally does this, but whatever. And then this canvas is held in place by primarily this zipper right here, which just say Wicco. Check for something. I'll figure it out later. But anyway, and then sadly, because this is a bit old, of course, these straps are a bit degraded with the leather quality, but the straps would go in between this nut and the washer right here, or below them, and would be basically squeezed on tight from all of the, well, excluding this bolt and this one on the back here. And these just help to keep it, the canvas cover in place, but really this zipper does really all the work you really ever need anyway. And then these main bolts, by the way, right here, oh, there we go, are all used in the frame. So once the camera is installed onto the aircraft, it's installed onto a frame. Well, this is how it is put onto the frame. So these nuts will be put over, tightened really hard, therefore it's on. And then on this side, the canvas bag has an obvious cutout for the connector cable, which is this the yellow strand here, this guy. And then on the front of the camera, there's the lens, clock cover, and then you've already seen the latch, the cassette, and once it's open, the cassette can be taken out. I guess I'll just put this right here for now. And then all S-13s will come with an additional cassette. One more thing, actually, I just remembered about this. With the SSH-45, all the comms cameras, military Soviet aircraft cameras, the insides will be styrofoam. So instead of these wooden shelves, it'll all be styrofoam. But for the Czechoslovakian, and I presume the Polish examples as well, it is all wood with felt lining. There's felt right here on the ground and in the back here, and then wood shelves. But anyway, I just remembered about that in the random. But anyway, there will always be an extra cassette that comes with an S-13, or usually most Soviet cameras to begin with. They always come with an extra cassette just in case. And then there's one, oops, wrong hand. There we go. Jeez. A vertical adapter shooting prism. And then lastly is the tester. I believe it's referred to something like prism something as well. It's hard to get a translation sometimes. But I believe, if I'm not mistaken, this is mainly used to test the machine, the S-13, to ensure that it's filming straight and correctly. So there's a bunch of mirrors here in this device, and this can be taken out as well. And I believe you just set the camera here, and then you can look into the lens. You can't see now. There we go. And then of course, it is designed to allow for the tester. I'm just calling it the tester as what I believe it is to be. Is for, typically qualified technicians to ensure that S-13 is recording correctly. I am definitely not one of those. And now let's get to the shelf right here. So on the top of the shelf, there's the connector cable, as I already pointed out. This one has the wire pulled out at some point. At some point, I will fix that. So we'll just set that there. And then there's this lamp with a green filter on the top of it. I am personally not quite sure what this is for, and I can't find a good really explanation for it, as I never got the manual for this camera. So I believe it must be something to do with like testing it as like an artificial light source, but that's just my theory. And then at the top row here, there are two nut wrenches. So I don't have the smaller one, sadly, which is used to replace the lens actually on the S-13, but this, put that there, this wrench is used actually for tightening down the main bolts on the body, loosening them and tightening them. So very useful and good to have. Sadly, I do not have the smaller one, but the smaller one is just used for replacing the lens through these nuts right here. And then within the top, there are also two extra spares of film spools. There it is, I believe. One of them is the starting position where the film is stored, and then as it records, it gets put onto this spool right here within the filter. So anyway, so if I am understanding things correctly, of course, the film starts here, and it'll go through the cassette onto this guy, and it gets routed to this spool right here, and this is where the film gets saved after it goes and gets used through here. But those are just exact replacements for those two. And then for the two types of lenses, so for the shooting prism and then for the standard lens, there are primarily those lenses, not lenses, those colored glass pieces right here. So these are where these are stored. These are too much of a pain to get out of the paper because I like them being in the paper, but I will supplement a photo, obviously. And then an extra spare part to just an extra spare metal sheet to various part in the camera or cassette. And then, yep. And then for the bottom shelf, this can just easily be taken out. I'm running out of room now. In the bottom shelf here, there are two little compartments right here. You can just barely see right here, and they just are there to hold extra parts and whatnot. So at the very back here, this is where the additional lens is stored for whichever one's installed. If the Fed 100 was installed on here instead, the I-10 would go here. Right now the I-10 is installed, Fed 100's here. And then the last true items that I have are mainly in this wooden little block is spare nuts for, if I'm not mistaken, main nuts for the S-13 itself. And then I also have some more spare nuts for the lens nuts in case if those ever get lost, and a washer. And that's all I have that I got with this when I purchased it. The only items that I'm missing, I believe, are the smaller wrench tool that I mentioned, the cloth for cleaning the glass lenses and the glass pieces, the manual, passport, and then the 6 extra, well, additionally, the 6 extra 26-volt lamps, which would have been held right here. It'd be a little wooden piece. It would hold 6 extra additional lamps in case of the if one of the two in here ever went out. And it would sit right here. I do not have it, sadly. And then, lastly, the last really big thing is I never got the additional watch that you installed onto the cap right here. Well, you take the cap out. It was its own cap. Anyway. And if you go to eBay and if you look them up, most of them are well above $100, and I'm all good there. I'm all good there. But oh well. But that's pretty much all that there is to the inside. The S-13 began serial production at the Com's optical mechanical plant based in the Soviet Union within the city of Kazan in 1947, and is still claimed to be producing the S-13s to this day in the modern Russian Federation. After beginning serial production in 1947, the S-13 would be installed in many combat-capable aircraft made by various OKB branch designers based within the USSR and its allies for nearly 4 decades. The very first aircraft that seemed to operate the S-13 was the post-World War II newly made LA-11 aircraft by the Lavochkin Design Bureau. Early aircraft, such as the LA-11, would have the S-13 placed just outside, or within, in this case, the cockpit. Most aircraft, however, that operated the S-13 starting in 1949 and beyond would have them placed somewhere near the front of the plane or in the aircraft's wing. Typically, if it is in the wing, it's near the middle of the wing. By 1949, with the adoption of the MiG-15, the S-13 camera would be placed into the upper nose section right above the engine air inlet. By around 1953, with the addition of radars and the creation of the MiG-17P, and alongside with the MiG-19P, the S-13 was removed entirely and replaced with the AKS-5 camera and moved into the left side of the nose inlet. The AKS-5 functioned nearly identical to the S-13 in principle, but had a switch built onto it to change from 16 frames per second to 32 frames per second. The S-13 was only capable of 8 frames per second, which should be kept in mind, as that would be a very limiting reason, and a good reason, for its removal in many scenarios during this time period. From 1955 to 1959, the AKS-5 would predominantly replace the S-13 in the weapons engagement recording role in combat aircraft. The last airplane to mainly use the AKS-5 was the Su-7 series of aircraft within the right wing, beginning in 1959 until they ceased production in 1972. During the short period in time from 1949 to 1953, another new camera would be made and used in junction to the S-13 to film through the ASP-4ND gun sight from the MiG-15, alongside other aircraft that used the sight, like the TS-11, L-29, and L-39 aircraft. This ASP-4ND would be completely phased out by around 1955, when the ASP-5ND gun sight came out for use for current combat aircraft of the time, like the MiG-19, MiG-21, and Su-7 series of aircraft, with the intended use of the SSH-45 camera. From here on until the 1980s, most combat-capable aircraft would be given the SSH-45 to record the ASP gun sight, if they were given one, of course. Now, it seems that by around 1961, certain newly designed frontline combat aircraft would stop using the S-13 and AKS-5 for the recording of weapons engagement altogether, and would go on instead just to be issued with the PAL 473. Then, not only was the SSH-45 issued, trying to do this now, hopefully, I'm just showing anything. The SSH-45 would be issued with both the PAL 473, which was used on the RP-21 and such, for many years by combat aircraft with radar stations. With that said, though, most older aircraft still being manufactured during this time period were still outfitted with the AKS-5 and S-13, like the Su-7, which saw production until 1972. The main life of the S-13 after the deletion in primary roles within combat aircraft beyond 1961 was for dedicated training aircraft, after-action reports, and helicopters. For the MiG-21U and MiG-21UM, there was an optional camera pod that could be installed on either wing, or both, containing an S-13. This version of the S-13 was known as the S-13 300-100 OS, which used the FS2 lens. This camera pod was only used to record how the pilot did in their training, usually with weapons. Even the MiG-21-Bis could use this external camera pod. However, I cannot find any other information about other airframes from the MiG-21 family using it, or the MiG-23, Su-7, all of that. Can't find any information at this time for them. But it can be possibly assumed. Additionally, the L-29 dedicated training aircraft was equipped with a standard S-13 within the front radome nose of the airplane, as well as the TS-11 trainer, same location, front radome. That said, the Mi-8 and Mi-24 are the most predominant users operating the S-13 still to this day as well. This is assuming, of course, the countries using these helicopters are actually using these camera systems. These cameras, the S-13 300-100 OS, are present for the Mi-24V, D, A, and P, and they are used in the right wing. If you look head-on of a Mi-24 series of helicopters, the right wing will have a large cylinder with, coincidentally, a lens looking out. That should be where the S-13 300-100 OS is. The Mi-8, on the other hand, had the S-13 300-100 OS on the left extrusion on the exterior of the helicopter, which is above the left landing gear. And with the history of the S-13 explained and talked about, that brings an end to the video. Now, that brings an end to the S-13, but I do very much so plan to do another part of this, as one could call it, for the SSH-45 specifically, in potentially the FKP 2-2-1. If I do end up getting that, I will most likely just combine it with the SSH-45 video, and then a definite third video, or potential fourth. But a definite third will be for the PAL 473, which was used on, let's see, it was used on many Soviet aircraft with radars, MiG-21, MiG-23, MiG-25, so on and so forth. But that's a little bit of a little plan for at least the time being. It won't be immediate or anything. I'm definitely going to do something else before I release another part to this, but that's pretty much all there is to it. So all the information I talked about here in this video, a lot of it comes from random manuals to aircraft and such. So I definitely haven't listed everything, but if you know what you're really looking for, you can very easily find it in a lot of Soviet manuals. But for the sources I did provide, though, I provided a myriad of sources for stuff about the S-13 specifically, history on Fed, comms, and then I've given some short little anecdotes of manual, like actual aircraft manuals and what they provided. So I have a Serbo-Croatian from manual for the MiG-21 from Yugoslavia, and then a MiG-21 from the Polish archive in Krakow. That's not the correct way to pronounce it, sorry. And yeah, I have some of those listed. I have some of the links for them, but generally speaking, they should be all good to go. And there's still a bunch of information on all those websites, like more than what I've covered, definitely, especially for the one that's about Fed. But anyway, I hope you all enjoy. I hope someone finds this interesting. And then, yes, I know it's disappointing to end this without actually filming anything on it. I want to. I will do that later, though. Because I have to develop it, yada, yada, yada. Excuses. But I'll try to at least do it at some point. Once I have more interest in actually developing the film. But, other than that, that's pretty much it. Thank you all for watching, and have a good rest of your day.